Welcome back to the Boro Breakdown podcast with me, Jonny, Dana, and Tom. We are the Boro podcast that gives you the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs of Middlesbrough Football Club. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to the 126 people that have reviewed the podcast and give us a rating from the UK, America, Abu Dhabi, Australia. All the ratings. I sat down yesterday and looked back at them all, and I absolutely loved reading through them. I had a long week as well. And it was just nice to sit down and see all the reviews. So thank you very much for that. But also, I want to thank Dom Smith as well for his review. He sent me through a DM and he said, essential listen for all Boro fans, the right balance between entertaining and informative. In a time where we can't watch the Boro, this podcast has definitely helped with me keep up to date with the team. Having said that, I look forward to listening to these three for many years to come. So how nice was that from Dom? How nice was that? Very
Lovely.
nice. But if you want to leave us a review, guys, please do on Apple Podcasts, 5-star review or whatever you think of the podcast. Well, that'd be really good and helpful for us. But if you want to DM us, our DMs are always open for anything. Just give us a DM there. So now that's all done, let's chat about the Boro. And Dana, well, Paddy McNair Boro from potentially losing 6 games in 7 at home with an 82nd minute equaliser, keeping Boro in 9th place on the championship table, 5 points off the playoffs. Dana, Boro made 4 changes to the side that lost against Bristol City, and probably less said about that result, the better. With Mendes, Lang, Grant Hall, Sombalonga, and Max Tavernier all coming at the side. I think how nice was it to see Tav coming back in, and why did Boro lack that creative edge yesterday? They did make the change, but we just didn't look like we were ever going to score.
Yeah, I think it was because of the way that we were set up tactically. I don't know whether it was a masterstroke from Neil Warnock and his intent was actually to play into Cardiff's hands until later in the game and then take advantage of tiring legs and then put Cabano on later on, or whether he just got it wrong. But whatever it was, for 75 minutes, it was a really, really tough watch. A good point, don't get me wrong, and defensively Boro was sound, and I don't really think Kiefer Moore had much of a sniff in the game. It was only that long throw that was a lapse in concentration from Boro and poor quality defending-wise. But going forward, it was just, we were playing into Cardiff's hands, and if you were to ask Sean Morrison and Aidan Flint what they would want to defend against, it would be long balls forward towards a striker. And Britt Sommalonga isn't a target man anyway, so you're not going to get much luck out of punting balls forward. And it just felt like we were persisting on this, and it went beyond insanity at one point. I felt like I was going insane, and by full time I felt like the energy had been zapped from me. And it was a good point, but the performance wasn't good defensively for me. It wasn't until Cabano came on that we actually started to exploit Cardiff's weaknesses and work around them rather than playing to their strengths, because we spoke last podcast about playing to our strengths, but yesterday we played to Cardiff's strengths, and that was really frustrating to see. But nonetheless, a good point, still some positives to take. But yeah, that game was, I think Mick McCarthy said it himself, it was probably one of the worst games that he's ever watched, and he's probably spot on.
I felt like I was watching rugby union. The amount of time the ball was in the air and it would just come crashing down, and then we'd just run to the opposition half and then just boot it along again. And it was just like, this is the worst game I think I've ever seen. I bet there was some sore heads like this morning, like getting up. The amount of heading I've seen, it was incredible. It's a game of head tennis. But anyway, Tom, speaking of long balls, we played a lot of long balls yesterday, and Dana said we were playing exactly to Cardiff's strengths, but Warnock did change it in the second half. He brought on Spence, Johnson, Akpom and Cabano, and it ultimately got Boro to play the ball on the floor, and then eventually we did score from getting the ball on the deck, moving it quickly, and then eventually we managed to get the chance we needed, and we put it away. But do you think the changes really helped Boro going forward, because it just didn't look like we were capable of doing anything in that first half?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for most of that game, both teams just kind of cancelled each other out. And I don't know why we ever expect anything different when we play Cardiff, because I can't think of a game where we played Cardiff probably in the last 5 years where it's actually been entertaining. There was one in the one of the Tony Pulis seasons where Warnock was still managing Cardiff. We played them away. I think it might have ended 0-0 or something, and it was one of the worst games ever. Not the worst game I've ever seen. That one still belongs to when we played West Brom in the Premier League season. It ended 0-0. Rushed home from London that day to watch it, and it was terrible. But yeah, I think when we started playing it on the floor a bit more, because we did have flashes of that in the first half. I think Tav and Watmore in particular were trying to create across the floor, and it was great seeing Tav back in the team and trying to link things up. I think he was a bit of a positive spark for us yesterday. But then as soon as we started bringing on the kind of more pacey players who would play it across the floor, that's when we started picking up for the last 15. The goal we scored was like something out of Score Hero on the mobile, like, you know, and you can draw just like really weird passes to people, because that kick out from Bettinelli at the start, how that made it to one of our players, I'll never know. It was just like it was written. But it's a somewhat, once we put those players on the pitch and played across the floor a bit more, it obviously worked wonders for us, and I think that by the end, a draw was a fair result anyway.
It was. I mean, I wish I could have those 90 minutes back of my life, to be honest, because it was terrible to watch. I had the candles going and everything just to try and spark some positivity in my life, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible for that whole 90 minutes. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. But Tom, I want your opinion on Cabano, because Warnock absolutely slated his front three and benched him from his performance on Tuesday, against Bristol City. And no disrespect to him, I think the whole team was poor on that night. But for me, every time I see him, he seems like a bit of a caballer. So it's sorry, that was awful. That was absolutely awful. But he made a real difference yesterday, though, didn't he? And he's made a real difference to the team going forward since his signing in January. Yeah,
definitely. And to be fair, I think yesterday with him being on the bench, it could have just been to rest him. He's played a lot since he's came in, whereas other signings necessarily haven't. And he could have been tired, made more of an impact coming on in the last 20 minutes, and obviously he did make an impact, so that ended up being a good thing for us. What I'd like to see going forward, as soon as Bolassi's back, is someone on the other wing to kind of, because I do notice people tend to double up on him when he's trying to get a cross in or attacking one flank. I think if we had Bolassi back on the other side, it'd be a bit more balanced, and they wouldn't just think we're going for the Adama Traore tactic of just give it to the pacey winger and Obi knocks it in. That's no disrespect to Duncan Watmore as well, because I know he does kind of play on the other side, but I feel like he's also kind of got a free role and drifts in centre quite a lot. So yeah, I think as long as we have someone on the other side to kind of take the focus off him from the other team, I think he can kick on even further.
Yeah, I think he can as well. I think we'll be very fortunate to get Cabano next year from Fulham, because it looks pretty stark for them at the minute to stay up. So if they do come down, I can't see them letting him go. Obviously Bettinelli's out of contract anyway, so it looks like he could potentially be a sign up for Boro next year. But for me, yeah, I think Cabano does a lot, and I agree with you as well. It'd be nice to see Bolassi in that role, or even play Johnson in further up the pitch, because statistically he's Boro's most creative player and he's contributed to the most goals this season. So it's strange to see him on the bench the majority of the time, but for me, I feel like we have to try and at least give him a goal probably on Tuesday night against Coventry. But there was a noticeable part of the game yesterday. It was just when the players were running out, and obviously Warnock alluded to it in his press conference. It's about Jonny Howson. Howson is now captain for Boro for the remainder of the season, taking the armband off Britt. Do you think, Dana, that pretty much signals Britt's exit from the club now? Do you think it's time that his Boro career is coming to an end?
I think it's pretty much common knowledge now, isn't it, that Britt's, the writing's on the wall for him. I will say, though, it's weird timing from Warnock, and I do take that as maybe Warnock accepting that Boro probably aren't going to place in the playoffs this season, because, at least in my opinion, surely the best thing to do is to put his arm around Britt and say, right, I trust you, lead us to the playoffs for the rest of the season, rather than taking the armband off him. I do think it indicates that Warnock probably expects Boro's season to peter out, essentially. That coupled with the comments about Tuba, which we'll talk about shortly, I just feel as though now we've got two out of form strikers that, whose confidence is shot. So it's a strange one. I'm not necessarily saying that it's the wrong decision, because I do think it's the wrong decision. I just think the timing of it is strange. He's gone back over on himself from his initial decision earlier on this season, and I just think the timing of it is a bit of a head scratcher for me. And it like I said, I think it shows that Warnock accepts that the season's probably going to peter out now. He didn't openly admit yesterday that Boro's playoff chances are a no-go, because mathematically they still are, but he did admit that it's going to be difficult because of the teams in and around us and the momentum that they have compared to us. Obviously, our home form is wretched at the moment, and we are inconsistent. So that probably culminates into Boro just missing out this season. So, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall for Britt. Good luck to whoever takes his place, because Boro are cursed with strikers, and Boro fan logic is we have no creativity, so let's blame the striker.
Well, I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that, but I think Britt doesn't help himself either. Like,
He doesn't.
I think
He doesn't.
His touch, yes, his touch, his movement. Yesterday, it just seems so off and poor. To be brutally honest, and I don't think he's shown his quality this season at all. To be honest, I think he's definitely a talent. In the seasons that we've had him, he's shown a lot of glimpses of real quality. And his movement in the box was very, very solid. And his goal record speaks for itself. It is relatively solid in a Boro shirt. I think it's 1 in 3. I think that he had. So for me, yesterday it didn't work. Captaincy, we said at the start of the season, it could be a masterstroke by Warnock to give him the captain's armband, to give him that kick up the backside he needs, and put some wind in his sail, and hopefully, see him for the end of the season. Hopefully, fire us up to the Premier League. But for me, it hasn't worked at all. He's done now. I think that's his Boro career pretty much finished. Unfortunately, we probably can't afford to not play him, because he's on probably that much money. It's pretty foolish not to. And we need the striker anyway, with Fletcher being injured again. So yeah, it seems pretty much the end for Sambalonga now. But I think Howson's a great captain. And Tom, would you agree now that Howson's probably a better captain than what Britt could be? And do you think it's Britt's time now? Do you think it's over and done with?
Yeah, well, I will say about Britt, I've stuck up for him before on the pod. Like Dana said, the logic a lot of the time seems like we've got no creativity, so blame Britt, but then he still managed to pull out double figures every season. And I've always kind of said I'd rather we had a striker in that position to miss the chances he does than not, because we've had our fair share of them. Particularly during Strachan's era, but I don't really want to think about that.
Yeah, let's not.
But to be fair, I don't think, particularly over the last couple of months, Britt's looked that interested. I think, like you said, he has shown quality in the last few years, but he just hasn't. He's not even been in the positions to miss those chances over the last couple of months. So, yeah, I think it's definitely his time at the club's coming to the end, and I think Howson's a great choice to replace him. He's a very experienced player. He's been promoted before. He's played in the Premier League before. Probably everything you'd want, kind of, in a leader for the younger players to look up to. Yeah,
he's arguably been Boro's probably best player for the last few seasons anyway, especially under Woodgate, where it was a really poor season. He was really consistent in that, and he was consistently good and could play anywhere, and proved how much of a good professional he is. So I think it's a great move for Warnock to give Howson the captaincy. But like we've said, I think it's Britt's time is very much coming to the end. I thought he was going to get a move probably in the January, but it's never materialised, and he could be a little bit fed up, I think. But end of the day, you've got to try and win yourself a contract somewhere else now. Because if you watched him on that sole performance yesterday and the way he's been the last couple of months, Jesus Christ, you'd be lucky to get a team in League One.
In fairness, though, if I was playing up front and they're just hopelessly punting it forward, I wouldn't have the best body language either. And I know that I always stick up for Britt. I do acknowledge his issues. I did think he should have came short a few times yesterday, and his movement isn't particularly great. But I don't really know what people expected yesterday. The way that we were set up tactically, whether it was Akpom, Fletcher or Britt, I don't think any of them. Well, I think Fletcher's best suited to, for that target man hold up play sort of game. But And I don't know what you expect from him yesterday. I think, the way that Boro was set up to play, it was just, let's hit the ball up long and hope for the best. That was what it was. It was just hit and hope, and there was no real conviction to it. It was just, let's get the ball up the pitch as quickly as we can. And, that is food and drink for Aidan Flint and Sean Morrison. So it was never going to be a good afternoon for Brick yesterday.
Yeah, I think you're true, but I think it's probably Warnock's problem that it didn't work out yesterday. But I think with Britt, I was more like alluding to like the last couple of seasons. Like, yeah, it might not be great for him, but you do create your own look as a forward. And it might not be statistic. We might not have played it with his strengths, but there's still things he can do where he could potentially influence the play and get in those positions, and put the chance he has away when he gets them. You know what I mean? That's what separates the people from the top to all the way down to the bottom. You know what I mean? Taking the chances, but sometimes he just doesn't take them, and it's equally frustrating. But I'll move on to Chuba Rakpom then. Neil Warnock wasn't particularly happy with him either, to be honest. Hasn't been in a very good mood at the moment, Neil Warnock. Blame recruitment as well. But do you think his comments were pretty harsh around Chuba Rakpom? It's his first season back in English football. And, we did pay £2.7 million for him. It was his signing. It was his number one choice. So for him to backtrack and pretty much blame him for his poor performance, do you think it was pretty harsh?
Yeah, it was harsh and it was baffling because, like you said, when Chuba Rakpom was signed by Boro, the first thing that Neil Warnock said was, I've been, wanting him for a while and he's my first choice. So he switched it up and flipped the script to he was the recruitment team's first choice, and we shouldn't go signing players based off what we see on the internet, which I hope isn't YouTube highlight reels, because can you imagine that? That would be something else. I'm hoping it's that he's talking about Y-Scout there, but it's a strange one with Akpom, and I jumped to the defence of the recruitment team 2 podcasts ago, but with things like that come out, it's hard to trust them, and I even said that back then, but that comment was a little bit of a head scratcher, and I would like to hope that Chuba Rakpom would hear those comments and use them as fuel for motivation rather than to get down on himself. But it's one thing that's irked me of many things this week, and the second time actually in the space of a couple of days that Neil Warnock has gone back on his own words. So there's been some baffling things coming from Boro this week, I must admit, and I just think it all comes down to what I mentioned earlier, that I think everybody pretty much accepts that this season is going to peter out now.
So what has been irking you this week then? Because you said there's been quite a couple of things that have upset you. What have been those things then?
Well, obviously the performances, the performance on Tuesday and then the performance yesterday, and I just feel as though what is coming out this week has made me go back to last season of what is the direction of Boro now, what are we going to do going forward, and with things like that come out about the transfer team, and this isn't the first time that Neil Warnock has sort of shifted some blame onto the recruitment and essentially openly criticised them. With that in mind, that the same problems are still very much there, I do feel as though Neil Warnock is a plaster of a deep cut with Boro, and something needs to be changed going forward. I hope and I pray that, whether Neil Warnock stays on in the future, that we can progress as a team collectively. I know you mentioned last podcast, I think it was, Jonny, about Graham Potter and Brighton and how they have a stitched in style rather than just going from manager to manager. I'd love to see that. But I just think we need some longevity, because the past couple of seasons we haven't had that, and I think that is what Boro need. So I'm trying so hard to trust the club, but with their recent decisions, it's hard to. So I don't know. I think things that have come out this week that have made me a little bit worried, I'd say.
Yeah, it's always paper over the cracks of Boro, and it has been for
Definitely.
like the last 3 seasons. So nothing's really going to change. I feel like Tony Pulis was a short-term plan. Jonathan Woodgate was that, we'll make it a 4 or 5 year plan where we'll have golden thread, and it didn't go right at all. And the reason probably why it didn't go right is that you threw him in at the deep end. You didn't build experience around him. Well, he should have had the experience around him. Like, it was his choice to do that, but didn't build the experience around him. Didn't really give him a chance to to bring in quite a lot of bodies. I think the 3 players he's brought in have turned out to probably be good signings now. But we will look like we were going to be a sinking ship under Woodgate. So Warnock's came in to short-term plan again, but the next time we do something now, we have to stick to it. We have to stick to whatever we want to do, whether it's possession style, like a Steel River like style where it's like aggressive football that represents the town or something like that. You know what I mean? Like something that helps Boro fans become, well connected to the club, but then also feel as though they can buy into a project which could be for the long term of the club, really. But currently writing a little blog post on that, Dana, so I'll
looking forward
come
to
very
it.
soon. Yeah, so hopefully I don't get in trouble again. It's Tom, but we'll move on. We'll chat about recruitment because Dana's alluded to it as well, and I just mentioned it there around, recruitment haven't got things right, and we've tend to make probably, I would like to say, we've tried to bring in players at a high fee for high reward, but it hasn't really worked when teams such as Brentford, Norwich, and Brighton have brought in players on a low fee, low risk, but it can also make marginal gains to improvement. But are you a little bit disappointed the way that Warnock's constantly shifting the blame on the recruitment team? He's not really taking accountability for the mistakes that he's potentially making.
To be honest, I'm not sure what to make of that because I'm not sure how much of an input the manager actually has into these signings. I think even if you look back over the last few years, we've had Woodgate apparently pitched Dijksteel, Bowler and Marcus Brown in his job interview as 3 players that he wanted to sign. But then going back before that, you had Pulis signing centre mids and centre backs, which I assume was his input, and then signed 1 winger that he never played. Then you look at Gary Monk, how much of that was his? I'm not sure. There was that whole thing with him and his agent, wasn't there? But yeah, we did want to kind of smash the league, and we've signed players who were established Championship players, but maybe not necessarily fitting into a system. Even I think the last time we kind of got it right, and you could tell it was the manager having a big input on it, was Karanka. But then we didn't follow through kind of all the way with that because he was having the same kind of rant in press conferences Warnock's just have, saying, it was a Guardiola and Justed and Bamford weren't his signings, where it was, apparently Snodgrass, Rodriguez, Boyan at the time. So I'm not sure how much of a kind of disconnect or input there is there from the manager and the recruitment team. But it'd be interesting to find out. But, whether or not we actually would, don't know, because it's a lot of it happens behind the scenes. So yeah, I don't really know what to kind of make of it.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because when you're looking at the signings that we've made, have we made them based on stats? Have we seen them live? Have we actually made put a portfolio together or a report on these players? Would there be a fit? Would there not be a fit? Characterized? How are they? Who do they hang around with? There's so much that goes on with transfers now. So it's a big.
At the start of the season as well, Warnock said about the recruitment team, they showed him a couple of centre-backs who were supposed to be the best in Europe, and he watched the video and he was like, they can't tackle. And it was like, oh yeah, but we've got all these stats, and he was like, I'm telling you, they can't tackle.
Yeah, I mean, well, hey, the best defenders in the world don't tackle. They actually positionally are very, very good, so they don't really have to just intercept it at times. So it's an interesting one like that. But yeah, with Warnock's type of signings, he wants those 2 planks of wood at the back and be big brutes. So when the ball does come in the box, you can just head it back out again and you're not going to get very far from it. But then we said on the last podcast that statistically Warnock doesn't do well in the Premier League because his centre-backs probably aren't quick enough to deal with the likes of the Aguero, Rashfords of the world. You know what I mean? They probably can't cope. Hence why he tends not to do that well, or he doesn't have the budget to do well either. But in terms of performances, Dana, Boro have now had 5 defeats and 7 at home. Obviously, with the draw on Saturday, It is quite worrying to have that home form. You've alluded to being a bit worried with like Boro's current performances. Do you think we've just necessarily been found out, or do you just think that Boro have kind of waved the white flag and thought, we're probably not going to go up because there's probably better teams, and we just thought we'll put some poor performances in for a while. But do you think it's a little bit worrying that we've been quite poor at home?
Yeah, I think we have been found out. I know you've got a note there about possession, and we were talking about it on the group chat the other day, and I think I mentioned that in 4 out of the last 5 defeats, we've actually had the majority of the possession. It was only Wickham that was the exception to that, but they're rock bottom of the table. They're the worst team in the league by far, so you could probably expect that. But it seems as though teams are content with letting us have the ball because they know that we don't have the conviction to threaten them. Basically, we don't have the quality or the idea to be able to take advantage of that, and it's frustrating because we do have a good plan A. You know, we have a fantastic plan A. It's gotten us to a really good position. It's gotten us close to the playoffs. We seem to like to play on that underdog tag of going against teams that do like to dictate possession and basically sit back, contain, nullify their threats, and then try to get at them down the wings. But then when we have the majority of the ball, we look like we don't know what to do with it, and there's just this block from the midfield and the defence, and we can't get past it, and it's frustrating. I think we just need somebody with, you know, incisive passing that, you know, can make that pass that splits the defence, work it down the channels and try to essentially get beyond the back line, and we just don't have that quality. We have pace now with Cabano, Balassi, the likes of, you know, Mendes Lang as well. Watmore's pretty quick and nimble, so we've added to it, but I think we still lack that one player for me, and it's disappointing to see because I think a playoff push is built on good home form, and Boro don't have that. So sorry to be a negative Nancy. I'm being proper negative and defeatist this podcast, but I think that's a big contributing factor to why I don't think Boro are going to get the playoffs this season. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we here's a stat then around possession. So I know last week we spoke about crosses, and we said that Boro defend really well against them, and then we went to see Bristol City score from their only successful cross of the game, which was absolutely hilarious. I just thought, well, that's typical Boro, isn't it? You know, 1 out of 6 crosses, and one of them was successful, and they end up scoring from it. But in terms of possession, Boro are a counter-attacking team. It's supported by data and stats, and when you watch us as well, we want to break with pace when we do have it. But here's our stats when we've had more possession in a game. We did put a tweet out as well, so if you haven't seen it, it's on our Twitter page as well. But Boro have won 2, they've drawn 1 and lost 14 games in all competitions when they've had more possession of the ball this season. Pretty stark stat, to be honest, because it shows that Boro aren't very good with the ball, and they don't have that ability there to really break down teams. But Tom, what can Boro do in the interim to try and improve this stat? Because it looks pretty horrendous. What can we do to make our attack a little bit better?
I think we covered it a little bit earlier, and it's keep it on the floor. For me, we're not good enough with possession, obviously, to win games, and I know we all kind of like different styles of football. I know you said last week you were a big fan of possession. I was the same. When Karanka was manager, I didn't kind of get some of the mourning from some of the people around me in the stadium because we were passing it back or passing it sideways. Just like, yeah, but they still can't score if they don't have the ball, and we're recycling possession and you know, making them chase us, tiring them out, and then like hitting them when we find a gap. Kind of like, you know, really scientific way of boxing. Like, you know what I mean? Like just kind of tiring other people out and jab them, and you know, eventually when there's an opening, hit them. I think at the moment, what we have when we have more possession is we pass it around quite a lot, quite well outside of their box, get it to one of the flanks, and then cross it in to a Sambalonga who still, as much as, you know, Warnock or Pulis would have liked, still hasn't grown 6 inches and isn't going to get on the end of these crosses over people like Aidan Flint. And also what I notice is like we'll have games where we play it across the floor and do quite well, then revert to going long ball the next game, and then again Assombalong is still not big enough to actually win them. So I think at the moment it is going to be more keeping on the floor. I'd like to see Tav playing kind of more of an advanced centre midfield number 10 role, because I thought he did really well at that yesterday. Get Cabano and Balassi on the wings, as they'll be able to run at centre backs and actually create something. And you know, based on performance yesterday in the brief time we saw him, and I know Warnock might not like this as he wasn't his first choice, but play Akpom up front, because I thought he assisted the goal well yesterday, which I thought he did well to do that. But also there was a point in the game where he won his header, it went out wide, and he got it at his feet. He was quite good at his feet. He burst into the box with a little bit of pace on his left foot and fired a shot at goal, which was on target until it either got blocked or got saved. I can't remember, but it went out for a corner. But I think that's the type of football that suits him. So if we're to play it on the floor, have someone like Tav finding the passes from midfield and playing it through the gaps, have Balassi and Cabano on wings being able to run at people and maybe cross it in, one could actually be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I think it's all around about playing through the lines, trying to gamble in and out the box. You know, there's trying to play at your strengths, getting the ball out wide, and if you want to play the low cross, I feel like that would probably suit what we have a lot better than knocking the ball in as high as we possibly can, just get on a big brute's head, which is very common in the Championship. You know, a lot of Championship teams have that big brute centre back, and you know, who kick lumps out of everyone, because it's the Championship. That is how the whole standard is. You know, if you have quality there and that intricate passing where it's crisp and you can get in and around, that's when the teams tend to do well. When you look at the likes of Norwich and Brentford, Swansea, the reason why they're at the top of the table is because they're able to cut open teams, because they're able to have that cut through the lines and essentially create chances, which some teams like us don't really do that well, because we just hope for the best by hooping the ball along and see if we can get the second ball, and we don't tend to win that anyway. So it's just like watching like the cycle over and over again. Do you know, like Scooby Doo, where like he's running across he's chasing after someone. It's the same background, but time and time again. So that's what it was like. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think with us, it's just has about intricate passing, and you do need the players sometimes to do it. You need that little bit of brilliance to do it. But I think that position really, it shouldn't really come from a number 10, and everyone talks about a number 10 being the keystone to your attacking play. Probably disagree. I think your centre defensive midfielder probably is that key when you look at like the Thiagos of the world. I'm going to say Harrison Reed at Fulham, where he's very, very good at breaking down the play and getting them moving again, where he gives it off his cheek and all. I was going forward. And
John Obi Mikel, prime example for us a couple of years ago.
John Obi Mikel, he looked like he was in 10 yards of space every time he had the ball, and we were able to create chances from him. I know he said under Woodgate, but he didn't do very well, and Bailey wrote a blog about it. But Ravel Morrison was very, very good off the ball. Like, he was always in loads of space, but he couldn't really, he obviously didn't do anything else with it. But in terms of someone else, Dana, do you think Boro should go in the market now to look for these type of players? Hopefully try and get someone. I know we said about Tav there, Harrison Reed, like a crab type player. Should we look probably to bring someone in like that?
Yeah, I think so. I completely agree with you about the defensive midfielder and how I think they're probably the most pivotal part of the midfield. And I have grown to like Boro's midfield a lot more this season, but there's still a player missing. And for me, it's somebody that can take it on the half turn and get Boro forward. That can play the penetrative pass and just, I don't know, the risk taker. I mean, I watched a lot of 1860 Munich games, and they have one player called Richie Neudecker, who I put a video up about the other day. So silky on the ball. Might not necessarily always have the quality on it in terms of final pass or whatever, but for the most part he does, and he's somebody that brings the team forward, that connects the dots in midfield. I think Boro needs somebody like that. We've got similar midfield players who I think are hard working, and they are good at sort of the individual duels in midfield, but I think we need somebody that can take the ball, get Boro forward, play it diagonally across to the Watmores and the Cabanos, and play it through as well. I mean, in my Coventry notes, I've got a few pointers about through balls, and we just need somebody that can do that, somebody that can take it on the half turn, has the agility to be able to take it round players, to just keep us ticking in midfield. We've had some decent midfield performances this season, but I still think there's something missing in that the middle of the pitch, and I would like to see a different type of midfielder in there.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to see who we bring in. I think when we look at Morsey, Howson and Saville, they're all very similar players. And Howson and Morsey very similar. Saville's slightly different. He's more of a box-to-box midfielder. But yeah, I feel like we just need that little bit of quality. Who can, like you said there, get the ball on the half turn, get out wide when we need to, dictate the player really, just to really dictate the player. I just don't think we have that.
Barry Bannon, dropping deep, taking the ball from deep, working the way up the pitch that way, and Barry Bannon's name always comes up when we talk about players like that, but he's done it for so many years in the Championship, where he just drops deep, picks up the ball, turns, off he goes, has the creativity, has the creative eye to be able to spot the openings. We don't have that type of midfielder for me.
For a second there, I thought you were going to say Barry Robson. I was like, what? That's a massive throwback. That's a massive throwback.
I love Barry Robson.
The Barry Robson.
Bring them all back. Willow Flood.
Chris Killen, Scott McDonald, Chris Boyd. But in terms of one thing that hasn't really changed for us this year is probably the defensive side of our play. I know we said about going forward, but defensively, a big weakness for Boro is pacey sides. And I know I mentioned it there with the likes of Swansea and Norwich and Brentford. They all have quick players in and around it. We identified last week that we're not the quickest, and that is the reality of it defensively. Do you think it's the reason why we play the way we do then is to protect the defence? Because if we're a very expansive side, I feel like we get cut open very, very quickly because we're just a little bit too slow on the turn. Do you think that's probably the reason why Warnock's got us trying to play that long-term play, is to essentially just try and protect the defence because we're not as strong as we want to be, and just hope for the best going forward? Do you think that's Warnock's plan?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't necessarily think you need pace to defend against pace. Of course, it helps because you're not at an immediate disadvantage, but I just think you need the awareness of movement and when those players are going to try to, make those runs in behind the defence. To be honest, I feel like Neil Warnock was set up the way that he does anyway, regardless of the players that he had at his disposal, because that's just what he's done for 40-odd years in management, or however long he's been in the game for. It's the type of football that Neil Warnock seems to want to play. I will say, though, that out of all of these experienced managers, Neil Warnock seems the most adaptable to a team and a squad, which is fantastic to see. Usually you see an experienced manager come in and, they're stubborn as old boots and they will not move away from what they're used to. But it doesn't really work against the pacier sides, and it's just because of quality. I think we do have to recognise that we have Dyke still in defence, who's a centre defensive midfielder, turn right back, turn centre back, but also sometimes plays right back. Then you've got Paddy McNair, who's came through as a defender, then became a midfielder, and then now has gone back to defence. And then you've got Dale Fry. So Dale Fry's the only out-and-out centre-half that we have. So I'm not saying by any means that back three, I'm taking a 3-5-2 in this example, is bad. I think it has the platform to be a good defence, but we're going to have issues with it. And I think we've seen that this season. I do think they've got the ability to grow, though. And Boro's style of player has the ability to grow as well. We just need to plug gaps. We're not a million miles away from being a really good side that can get into the playoffs. We just need that little bit extra quality, like we said, in midfield, out wide, up front. I think that's what we need.
Yeah, but in terms of what we got at the moment, Tom, it seems pretty much abundantly clear that while we brought in Cabano, Balassi and Mendes Lang, it is just to catch teams on the break, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a big part of our game plan, just to soak up the pressure, force them out wide, get the crosses into the box, and obviously we said stats wise we are good at defending those. Then get it out and try and hit them on the break. For me, the team this year, it's not complete. And as Dana just said, we do need bits of quality kind of all over the pitch. But what I'd liken it to is that season where Karanka first came in and he was having to kind of play players, shoehorn him into certain positions. I'm thinking like Emmanuel Ledesma, fair enough, he had a decent bit of form under Karanka, but we signed him as a winger. I think he ended up playing as a number 10 for a lot of the time, and he didn't have the players at his disposal that he would have wanted. And then we addressed that in the summer. It was kind of a very complete transfer window. What I'd like to see from us going into next season, as long as Warnock's still here, is kind of have a more complete transfer window than the one we've had. Because the last couple of years, fair enough, I know finances have been something that's held us back. But it kind of feels like we've addressed certain areas in the summer. Then everyone could see kind of heading into the seasons we are lacking in other areas. And then we'll address those other areas in January where it's already kind of too late. Not saying it was kind of too late for this season because we were doing all right, but a lot of the teams, the players must have been fatigued from that first half of the season because we didn't have any depth. So maybe that's still having kind of an after effect now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And let's move on to the questions as well, because we do come to a point on that. So thanks for everyone who sends questions this week. We'll break them down now. But Charlie's the first one, and he says, with us being a counter-attacking team, I think we've pretty much alluded to most of this point, but it's with us being a counter-attacking team is the only way to change by bringing different players, or can coaches teach players to be effective when we know teams will come in and sit deep and keep on the deck? So can Boro change it maybe in terms of the players that we have, Tom, or is it a case of we just need to probably bring in some players to fit a certain style?
I think it's a bit of both. We could try and coach them to be a bit more patient with possession and play a certain style, but I don't think that's likely to happen. As much as I would like to see it happen, it does seem like we brought players in to just play that certain style. Like we just in the last question, it was a very counter-attacking style. We're trying to get crosses into the box. We're trying to get our striker to get ahead on it. So as much as I would love to see us kind of be coached into to being a bit more patient with possession, I think we can all see when we're in the games where we have more possession, our plan is to kind of pass it around the midfield, then go out wide, try and aim to get a crossing and get someone's head on it.
Yeah, you just pretty much answered the question very well then, mate. I like that. Dana, is Boro's recruitment as bad as people say? The last few windows we've made some smart buys such as Watmore, Dykesteal, Balliman, there's Lang. We've got with the resources. We've got. Is it fair to start off the recruitment team other than Akpom's, like the recent signing, which has potentially been a flop? Is Boro's recruitment as bad as we think it is?
It's a difficult question to answer because I will mourn to the high heavens about Boro's recruitment team, as we all have on this podcast many times before. I will say I don't think it's as bad as some people say, because we do need to give them credit for the likes of Dykesteal, Baller. McNair got criticised when he was here. Howson got criticised when he first came here. Saville as well has improved this season. I think Hall seems like a pretty good buy from the limited time that we've seen, but he seems like a solid signing. And Morsey, I think, I quite like the signing of Morsey as well. So I do think we need to give them credit. But all in all, I mean, Neil Warnock has sort of said it himself that there needs to be things changed in the recruitment team, whether it's a change of approach, that you look into, the Brentford way of number crunching, essentially. I know that Neil Warnock doesn't particularly like that, and even said yesterday about the game, I know I'm not a stats man, but we dominated the game statistically. So he doesn't seem to particularly like numbers and statistics, so he'll love this podcast. But I think I don't know. It's difficult to trust them, like I said a couple of podcasts ago, because we do always go into a transfer window and it's like Boro's linked with this player and Boro's linked with that player, and then we never get them. And eventually it starts to grate on fans because they start to get impatient naturally. I mean, half of those players, you never know, Boro might not actually be in for it, might be agent talk, but it does start to chip away at your confidence in the recruitment team. Can I say that, hand on heart, I trust them? No, absolutely not. But I do think they deserve a little bit more credit than we give them. I don't know the structure of the recruitment team anymore. Is Gary Gill still a part of it? That's the clarity that I would like to know.
One man I know that is Tom Green, and Tom from One Boro. Do you know?
Unfortunately not. I can't even tell from Football Manager. I mean, we've got a different chief scout on it this year, so Gary Gill's still there, but according to Football Manager, it was a different chief scout.
But yeah, with Boro's recruitment doing it, yeah, it's hard to slate them at times, but also you can point the finger. But it's I think it's both parties of the manager, the recruitment staff, to try and get the right players in. But I think the best thing that happened to Boro, and I know financially it's going to be a really big struggle for us because of COVID, but COVID might be the one thing that might be positive for Boro in terms of recruitment, because it's going to have to force a club not to buy and spend loads of cash on players that might not potentially be the right fall for us. They can actually take low risks now on players that are probably a lot cheaper and probably a lot of free agents kicking around. It's going to force us to probably delve into those markets and be really technical on how we bring in players now, rather than just splash the cash on anyone. So I think that's probably the only positive I can potentially bring from COVID. But in terms of the recruitment side of things, yeah, there is improvement to be made. It's not never going to be perfect. You're always going to get signings that aren't always going to be great. But if you can try and get a bit better, and you can not maybe spend a lot of money on high risk players, then that'd be probably perfect. I think the problem we've got is 16 million for Britt, 10 million for Braithwaite, 7 million for George Saville, 7 million for Aidan Flint, 5 for House, and 5 for McNair, 7 for Ashley Fletcher. The list goes on. So yeah, it's not been particularly great, but we have got a little bit better in the last couple of seasons with Watmore, Dyke, Bowler. Marcus Brown, he did look quite good this season until he got injured. So yeah, well, it's a long-term process. I think Boro fans have to be patient with it, but something has to give, whether it's the manager or the recruitment team that gets sorted out. But next question, it's from Danny Beardmore. He says, if that Cardiff team we played against today was the blueprint of a team Warnock wants to build for Boro over the summer, would you want him to stay? I wouldn't. So Tom, would you like us to play like that Cardiff team, and would you like Warnock to stay on, or would you like to see Boro go in a different direction?
I mean, I'd like to see him stay on. To be honest, I said in our group chat yesterday, I won't question him too much in terms of kind of like man management, how he puts the teams up, because he's got a proven track record. He's got, how many was it, like 12 promotions out of this league, or out of the Football League, so I don't know if it included Leagues 1 and 2. But he's got the experience, he's got a proven track record. The stuff we've talked about, for all we know, the shots at kind of like the front three and Akpom and stuff could have been used to motivate them. Man management style, only he'll know that. In terms of a blueprint, I think yesterday's game, like I said earlier, was always going to be awful. Let's not forget that Cardiff have been getting results up to yesterday when they essentially played a side who were going to play the same way as them, and we cancelled each other out and ended up just being one of many, many boring games against Cardiff that we've had over the years. So, it is a blueprint for success, I think, and I would like to see him stay on. But also, as I've said to you guys in our group chat, I think when it is time for Warnock to leave, I want to see some continuity in who takes over. Because I do think, looking at some of our past management signings, that the club does want to play 4-3-3 long term. I think going back to when we had Gary Monk, and he kind of set up in that formation. I remember going to a friendly against Augsburg, I think it was, and watching as like Clayton was dropping into the back two as the wing backs push forward, and thinking this is never going to work this season, and typically it didn't. But then we've also in the last 2 years had Woodgate, who said from the start he wanted to play that. Warnock, who said from the start he wants to play that. But like we said earlier, he is more adaptable. So I feel like it will be someone who plays that formation afterwards. And I just want to make sure that we've got the players here that suit that next manager. So we're not having to start this process all over again.
rips it up and starts all over again.
I mean, it would be the Boro way, but
It would be.
Yeah, it's true. It's the short term of Warnock, I think, which people are scared of. But in terms of Warnock, like what he built at Cardiff was fantastic. He got them up and they won a lot of games and managed to get to the Premier League. Yeah, of course, it didn't work out there, but he has a great record there, and he's won the most promotions anywhere else. So you can't knock him at all. Like there is frustrations and sometimes the style, and it can be frustrating to watch. Like how many times we knocked the ball along at the land of the Giants, it was just kind of like I don't really see where we're going with it. You can always be critical, but you can't knock what he's done, and the facts show that he is the most successful manager in the Championship, and it is for a reason. So ideally, would you want him to stay on? I think yes, but if we do want him to stay on, then we have to have that continuity, which you mentioned there, Tom. Like, if he goes, then are we going to play a similar style? And if we're not going to play a similar style, what's the point of Warnock staying this season? Because we may as well just get rid of him now and then. So at the end of the season, and then implement something that you really want to do. Because Boro could be in a really good position at the end of the season, because you'll see the likes of maybe Fletcher go, you'll see Brick go, you'll probably see if Neymar might not sign on, so he might go. You haven't got a goalkeeper at all because Archer's a short-term deal, and so Bettinelli's on loan. What else have you got? You're losing quite a lot of players anyway, so it'd be perfect for a manager to come in and build something quite quickly, but they have to come in straight away because that window is very, very short in the summer. So it's Boro could struggle quite a bit next year if Warnock didn't stay on. But next question, and it leads quite nicely onto Coventry as well. But Danny said again, the subs changed the game, but why do we wait so long? Would you play Cabano, Spence, and Johnson on Tuesday, Dana?
I'd definitely play Cabano. I did do a team for the Coventry game, and I did put Johnson in there, but I think it's harsh to drop Ball. I mean, I did do it in a 3-5-2, my favourite formation, but in a 4-3-3, I think you could make a case for Johnson starting the game. I mean, I know you said there statistically he is our most creative player, along with Tav, actually, I'd say. I don't know where Tav actually places in that, but Tav is quite creative himself. So I would like to see Johnson get a start. I think Cabano has to start after his cameo off the bench. I would actually start Cabano for the rest of the season, to be honest. I think he is a really important player for us, and if we do want to make a late playoff push, we have to start Cabano for me. Spence, it's difficult with Spence because, again, it's, what is his best position? Is it right wing back? Is it right back? Is it right wing? It's a difficult one. He's sort of stuck in the Hayden Coulson issue, but I think Spence is a decent option off the bench. I wouldn't take Dijksteel away from right back or from that back line at the moment. So I would definitely start Cabano. I think he made a really positive impact yesterday, and I do agree with Danny. I don't know why he didn't come on earlier. I think he probably should have came on around the 60-minute mark because I feel like we left it too late yesterday. We played pretty well for the last 15-20 minutes, and then we could have won the game had we maybe made those changes earlier. So I'd definitely start Cabano. I think I'll make a case for Johnson. I think Spence is a decent option off the bench.
Okay, then well, that leads quite nicely to Coventry, guys. Coventry, a team that is struggling in the Championship table now, just one. I think it's 1 point above IR Crankers Birmingham, who are the fourth bottom in the Championship. But they have got a gap there. They've got a 7-point gap between Rotherham, who's hold the last relegation place, but they do have 2 games in hand. So I'll pass the mic over to you. Let's break down Coventry City.
So in terms of form, they're currently 20th in the table and the 20th in the form table as well over the last 6 games. They've only won 1 in the last 5. They drew 1-1 with Blackburn yesterday, with Ostergaard getting sent off in that game. So that hopefully might benefit us a bit on Tuesday. Before that, they lost 1-0 to Swansea. They got the win they got in that last five was against Brentford the week before that. They beat them 2-0. But before that, they lost 2-0 to Norwich and 3-1 to Cardiff.
Yeah, I was looking into sort of the they don't tend to score a lot, and I was looking into that sort of statistic. They've actually only scored 5 goals in the last 7 games. Their main striker, Matt Godden, is out with a foot injury. He's only played, I think, 14 games for them this season, but they typically play with 3 at the back. Of late, it's been a 3-4-1-2 formation with Walker and Biamu up top because Matt Godden is out injured. Like Tom said, Leo Ostergaard got sent off in the game against Blackburn for 2 yellow cards, and his centre back partner, Luke Hyam, I've identified as a weak link just based on what Coventry fans said. It was actually his mistake, I'd say, for the Blackburn goal. It was a cross that came in, and it was a swing and a miss really of a clearance, and then it fell to Sam Gallagher and he scored from it. Apparently in the first half he was quite poor, and then in the second half he improved, but all in all the Coventry fans were saying that he's Bambi on ice and he's too slow. So there's a potential area for Boro to exploit. But I think similarly to the reverse fixture at the Riverside, they'll probably look to be compact centrally and work it out wide to the wing backs. Dabo and McCallum, who had a good game against Blackburn by all accounts. They contained us really well up here, and I remember it took us quite a while to actually make the breakthrough. It was the game that Sam Morsey had fantastic display, and Jed Spence scored, and we all, our phones blew up with the Manjaro's tweet, so hopefully he can score again. But I think, Coventry have a good side. Absolutely love Gus Hamer. He's my favourite non-Boro player in the Championship. What an absolute honey badger he is. Definitely want to watch. But I think the problem for them is that individual mistakes have essentially put them in the position that they're in. One fan said that they've been blighted by mistakes this season, which is true. But another potential weakness that Boro can exploit is what I said earlier about through balls. Through balls are Coventry's kryptonite. They don't have the pace to deal with the ball in behind. We saw it ourselves with Morsey's through ball for Britt Zambalonga's goal. I'd say, get it down the channels, try to make them uncomfortable, play the ball along the floor, and hopefully we can get something out of that.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough game, but I quite like Mark Robbins' side. They're a very, very young team out there, and they've got some good quality players that can come through. For them, I think Callum O'Hare, I think he was on loan from Aston Villa, but I'm not too sure if he's made it a permanent deal.
He has, yeah.
He's made it permanent, yeah. So, yeah, a good quality player. They've got some talent there. I think it's similar to Barnsley, really, where Barnsley are a very, very young side, but when they get going and once they hit form, there could be a very, very good side to watch in the Championship this year. If they don't and they go down and have to come back up again, then that's just part of the process. But Mark Robbins is doing a great job at Coventry. So let's go for predictions. How are we feeling? We're away from home, guys, remember, so we can be a little bit more optimistic. I know this podcast has been quite difficult because it's the performance wasn't inspiring, can we say, really, yesterday, and that was on Tuesday night either. So yeah, let's go for predictions. How are we feeling? St Andrews, we had a good performance there a few weeks ago at the start. Was it December? Was it?
Yeah,
December, January. I feel like every day is rolling into one at the minute, isn't it? So, yeah, we won 4-1 down right against Aitor. So that's how we feeling. Win, draw, defeat. Tom, how are we feeling?
I'm gonna go 2-0 win. Actually, no, I think we're gonna go 1-0 win. I can just see it being kind of one of those games where it's quite scrappy and we're holding on by the end. I think, as Dana just said there, with Coventry looking to shift out the wing backs quite a lot, hopefully that'll play into our hands, and the fact that we can defend crosses really well. It just depends on someone getting the goal at the other end. So yeah, I'm going to go 1-0.
1-0 for Tom. Dana, how are we feeling? We're going to end on a positive note.
Yeah, I think it depends on what Boro turns up, to be honest. Because we're away from home, I do have more optimism, so I'm going to go 2-0 Boro.
2-0 Boro. I want to go 2-1. I can still see Coventry scoring. But I do think we'll get the 3 points at St Andrews and hopefully get our confidence back up, and hopefully Boro can bring us up to knock us back down again like they have this week. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you very much for joining me as always. And Boro's home form continues to suffer. Maybe it's time we should start looking to play somewhere else very similar to Coventry do. This has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was all your matchday chatter in a pod.